Welcome to the Gen Gap, a podcast that explores how senior leaders navigate one of the most complex transitions in the asset management industry as it relates to leadership and culture in a time of generational change. I'm your host, Maureen Fitzgerald. Today I'm joined by Philip Baker, a senior leader at EdenTree, a specialist in sustainable investing with over 35 years of history and a unique ownership model, being ultimately owned by a charity to which it donates all profits. With over 20 years in asset management, Philip brings deep experience across sales, client service, product, and marketing. He plays a key role in shaping strategy, leading teams, and building long-term client relationships, all with a strong commitment to sustainability and purpose. Please join me in welcoming Philip Baker. Philip, thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad you could be here.
That's an absolute pleasure. I'm very pleased to be here today.
Well, let's jump right in. If you could give your younger self at the start of your career some advice, what would it be?
Okay. Very good question. Very big question. I've probably got a big answer to this and maybe a small one if I'm allowed to sneak to it. I know you said one.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I think for me personally, it would be along the lines of it will be okay in the end. So I think there's a phrase that's probably far too commonly used at the moment that it's if it's not okay, it's not yet the end. It'll be okay in the end, but if it's not okay, it's not yet the end. So there's times in my career where I don't know, a huge project was going on, or a huge push, or a huge initiative. Maybe you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone. I work in asset management, so we have times of market highs and market lows. So there's certain times of uncertainty. And that can be quite stressful, actually, when you're building a career. And as a young person, you don't necessarily have, or I certainly didn't necessarily yet have the sort of emotional experience or the professional experience even. You know, in asset management, when you hit a bear market for the first time, you think it is the end of the world. And it's not at all, of course, 25 years later, still here. So I think it's that piece of knowing it'll be all right in the end. And what does that look like? How do you manage that? I think at the time I managed it through doing more work, taking more on. How do you push through these more challenging times, which maybe is okay when you're younger, but to be honest, it's not overly sustainable. I remember one of my directors; she was very good at grounding me in those circumstances when we were, a lot was on, a lot of pressure was on, and she'd literally say, "Phil, look out." She was American, but I won't do the accent. Phil, look outside the window. Yeah, is the sky still in the sky? Is the world still turning? Yes, it is. This will pass, basically. So that was always good guidance. I think there's a couple of other things that go with it. It's just experience of riding these things out. I think it's having more confidence in your ability. The serenity prayer, having the knowledge of knowing what you can't influence, the courage to influence that which you can, and then knowing the difference, i.e. focus on that which you can affect rather than worrying about the bigger picture. For me, it just came with age and experience. I think I go back 25 years and have some kind of narrative around that, I think would prove very helpful. The small one, if I'm allowed a bonus one,
Sure.
is basically always keep up your network. Always, always, always. So I've been very fortunate that I've had a number of roles that require me to build networks with peers or with clients. And at times, sometimes you've got to focus on the internal, but understanding the value of that network, what you can learn from it, the opportunities that might come from it, and they might come 10 years later. It's putting the time into that, even when there's no obvious immediate benefit, because what I know now is the time will come. So I think always build those connections, always build those networks, and always sustain them regardless of what else is going on. There's probably a million other things I could have learned earlier, but life is a lesson.
I think that is really good advice, because I do think for those that joined the workforce during COVID and were remote, they haven't really got traction yet in sort of building a network and maybe recognizing how powerful and rewarding from a personal perspective having a strong network is.
It's so valuable. I think it's worth stressing, because you can have a peer group where you can share what you're doing. What are your challenges? You can test your opportunities. If you've got a really tight group, you can get a really good view on the market you're working with. You can have friends, simply. You can have social
Absolutely.
network through it. It's allowed in business, funny enough. I was at a leaders event recently where one of the studies was published about Generation Z, about what are they most worried about. And it was having basically a network, having a connection, because they'd come, they're fully born into digital. They've come through COVID as well, and they haven't got that connectivity. So that might be a hard place to start from, but it's absolutely worth it to push yourself out there and build that network as much as you can. And me being generation I mean in person as much as you can, not digitally necessarily. That can help, that can start, that can sustain, as much as possible in person.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads nicely to my next question. How has your perspective on leadership kind of evolved, especially as new generations come into the workforce?
Yes, quite a bit. I'm pleased to say that my experience has changed a lot in that 25 years. Partly because I've deliberately put myself in an organisation that does take a different view from this, but I think also because leadership has changed so much over this time. I entered the market in 2000 as we were riding the top of the tech and tel boom before that went the other side. And my experience then was, what was seen as great leadership was, might be considered quite old-fashioned now. It was power-led. It was all about direction. It was probably how you could best run a command and control environment. It would be keeping a distance from people, so you didn't have the necessary that personal connection. Winning arguments, winning fights, debates, whatever, not physical ones, obviously. So there's a lot of power play, and certainly sometimes literally who could shout the loudest was sometimes the most important thing. And what that didn't really ever resonate with me. There was obviously other leaders around who had more pragmatic or nuanced approach. But fortunately, that's changed a great deal, because for those people who were, maybe that's what they had to do in that system. I don't know. I was only young at the time, but you didn't know who they were. You didn't know what they stood for. Didn't know what their values were. You didn't really know what they were trying to achieve, other than keep control and keep pushing people as hard as possible. You certainly couldn't connect with them, and the absence of all of that is the absence for me of a higher level of connection, a higher level of purpose, how you motivate people, how you build collaboration as well. So be it through societal changes, be it through academics, and every book is about authentic leadership and values-based leadership. That's a massive change, and I'm now in an organisation where that is absolutely our preferred model, and it's one I couldn't do it any other way, frankly. And I think business is better for it where it's the case. I'm sure there are some situations where command and control is more appropriate. Of course, you'd be flexible, but overall, showing the leader is an actual human being, and that you can aspire to be that person and still be aligned to your own values. I think that's a massive shift that's better for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. And so how has EdenTree handled bringing employees back from remote into the office, and how has that gone, and kind of what was involved in communication, leadership to make that happen?
Yes. I mean, we're going back a little bit now, aren't we, from sometimes memories we like to forget. So I think what was the challenge we were trying to solve is, how do we bring the team back together again and get all the great energy and collaboration? Reflecting on it, I think there was certainly for us, there was an element of compassion and an element of pacing. So it easily to forget, maybe gratefully easy to forget actually how miserable a time that was, but also what a paradigm shift we went through, and actually how scary it was. We were getting thrown negative information every single night on the news, and it put some people in very difficult circumstances about how they were interacting with the world. So beforehand, we worked really hard to keep up interaction digitally. We hadn't used digital platforms before. We moved from Skype to Teams, daily calls, end of week calls, online events, lots of interaction, camera on, human beings, camera on, not just initials, to keep up that energy, but bringing it back in, that was the challenge. So I think it was recognizing that not everybody was ready to do that quickly. So giving people space to readjust to normal or post society. I think that was an important part of it. But it came to a point where we had to state our position. We had to give a clear direction. And that's when we said to the business in our model of working that we do 50-50. So 50% minimum in the office and 50% can be working elsewhere or working from home. Now, our general narrative around that was we do our best work together. I absolutely believe that, best work together in person. And we empower people to have flexibility in their working lives and in their personal lives as well. And that kind of goes into the culture of EdenTree and the total package of what it means to work here. We've got very high talent, high professional people here. There's a lot of trust based here. So, and actually that worked really well. People came back on that model really quickly. So we got the people back, we got the energy back. What we didn't have in that model was the touch points, the innovation, because it was spread out across the days. So we sort of monitoring what happens, and then we review and we act. So we moved to having an EdenTree hub days. So we said, of the days you come in, 2 or 3, maybe typically 3, make the one Monday and make Wednesday, to try and get 2 days of the week where lots of people are coming together, so you can have those conversations and re-engagement and all that kind of thing. And you've got to incentivize that stuff, actually. So you might have team meetings only on those days. You might have social events only on those days, town halls only on those days. And that works as well. And it's interesting because you mentioned that, because it's dipped off a bit. I think we've just sat down and looked at it, and it's actually Mondays and Tuesdays. Some of them are good, some of them are off. So we're just using this period now. We're just doing our mid-year reviews for leadership and line managers to say, no, this is actual. We expect you 80-90% of the time to be doing your Mondays and Wednesdays. So we'll continue to incentivize that. We'll monitor it and see how it goes. But it's that pacing, that compassion, and that clear instruction and management that's worked well, actually. When Mondays and Wednesdays are bubbling away, it's a fantastic place to be.
Right. Well, you touch upon how important communication is. How are you managing career progression using communication and kind of engaging sort of the next generation?
Yes, career progression is always an important one to get right. I think the next generation, maybe the young generation has always had an expectation. Maybe that's unfair, actually, to say the new generation is more so. But perhaps they are more clearer on their expectations, of a business in general. So it could be the values of a business, the flexibility of the business, but also the career progression. So I think it's an important thing to get right. And if you do get it right, what are you doing? You're retaining talent, you're motivating people, you're getting the best out of people. So that's important to get right. The thing today, compared to the old days, is career progression is far from linear. You can move around in different roles, as everybody knows, and different times. Whereas we may have had 1 or 2 career paths, people may have 4, 5, or 6 or something at this time. So you've got that element, and you've also got the element that we're quite a small business. We're 60 sort of professional, high-skilled people. So what we don't necessarily have is the obvious grading of going A, B, C, D, E, and making your way through the ranks. You've got to think outside the box in these things. Open communication on that. We've done a few things. We've really pushed a culture of mentoring, initially formally, but that's naturally progressed in just having an ongoing culture. Every now and then I just hear a conversation. This person's been mentoring this person on a specific aspect. So what does that do? Not only is that knowledge sharing and cross-team collaboration, that's giving the person a chance to grow, develop their skills, and see other opportunities. Because we haven't necessarily got that obvious structure, we put together a couple of things when we did our culture work. We had a set of behaviors that go with each sort of value we were trying to or are embodying. But then what does it mean to be a senior person in that value set? So literally writing them down. A senior person does this, does this, does this. So you can fill in the gap, because if you're young, you just don't know what the next level looks like.
So you're identifying what skills you would need to be at that level, so they have an opportunity to work on those skills and get that experience.
Exactly right. Skills and behaviors. So we have a behaviors against the values, and we also have a separate sort of skills expectation around sort of 3 core areas. We have sales, marketing, operations, systems, and investments. So what do the skills look like? So you can map it. And then, of course, the line managers can use that. And line manager coaching is something else that we've got as well. I think the main message is, you've got to listen, you've got to have the conversation, come forward on that conversation. You've got to be brave enough to ask them where they want to go and what they want to do, and challenge them to define it. There's certainly that, but then being flexible. So we've had people come through real talent, they've gone quite different directions, but if you can see the value add for both, we can go and do it. we can make it happen. So if you can have that flexibility, you can keep that talent and just find different applications for it. So again, that seems to work quite well. We've retained talent and we've developed people, so that's working.
Okay. Another part of retaining talent certainly comes down to culture. How are you thinking about culture and actively shaping the culture of the firm?
Yes, so we did. I mean, culture means everything to everybody in different ways, doesn't it? So what culture do you need to achieve your objectives is an important thing. And where does that culture come from in terms of your values and your mission? We actually did a sort of an exercise with a consultant 18 months, 2 years ago now, to do exactly that. So we'd come out of COVID, where we were before. The business had switched into growth mode through backing from our owners about 4 years before. So it seemed the opportune time to do that. So we actually went through this exercise, and it involved the entire business. So whilst the leadership sort of set the frame, we want a growth culture. These are our sort of broad principles of what we stand for. The mission statement, and then particularly the values that were developed by the whole business. So every single person was in this process. You talk about inclusivity and hearing everybody. That really works. But what we said is we wanted a culture of a growth culture that fit with our values. So you probably can see, you might be able to see over my shoulder a couple of them. So we came out in terms of values: back each other, bold and brave, and own it. So these became and are sort of mantras in the office. And again, it's that, how do you continue to live it and sustain it? So whatever you do, leadership have to embody it. If you're doing Mondays and Wednesdays, leadership have to be in Mondays and Wednesdays. If you're bringing that value language into the business, you've got to use it yourselves. And that's what I think it did for us. We had a clear language of what our values are that drive our culture that we could share and use and practice. So we would, if somebody embodied them, we'd champion that at the town hall, explicitly. This person did this, which equals bold and brave. Well done, living it. We put it into our review process. So we review and incentivize on how you do your job and what you do. So the how bit is how you're meeting the values, and we invite the individual to write down examples against each of those values about how they've embodied them. And then it does link to incentives. So our incentives are much about the objectives of how you've done the objectives. So you've got to be on it the whole time. You always got to be thinking about it and reviewing it. But that exercise, actually, whilst I thought, oh no, another consultant, another process, is this really going to work? It really did. And having the language at the other end that you can all work to, as long as the leaders take it forwards, it's really powerful.
And I know you had mentioned to me in another conversation about a group that you put together of employees across level to kind of work on culture activities, training, social. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, sure. That's been really, I know I'm just full of really good things, but why not? That's been really good as well, actually. So, I mean, it's sort of formally called the Corporate Responsibility Committee. We probably need a name that's better than that, because that sounds a bit stale. But yes, we have this committee. There's representation from every single department in the business deliberately. It's by sort of self-nomination. We don't push people into it that don't want to be there. But that representation across the business is really good. It's also the younger generation more than, so the leadership aren't officially on this committee. We might come and join and see what's happening and support, of course, but we're not members. So it does tilt to the younger generation. So it achieves a couple of things. It's driving. So they were first challenged to drive through the values into the business and be the sort of the sponsors and the advocates to really bring that through, and that really worked. But we put a lot of responsibilities into there that empower that committee. So again, how do you get people motivated? How do you get them engaged? Well, empower them, give them responsibilities, and let them own them in totality. So where we direct our community giving is totally with that committee. It's quite a significant amount of money for us. And what projects we choose and how they align to our business, that's in that committee. Mm-hmm. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, maybe just quickly explain how EdenTree handles its profits.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Good point. So we're quite unique. We're ultimately owned by a charity. All of our profits go out to charity and good causes. And that really is why we're a sustainable specialist as well, is what's that social good in society. So we invest sustainably. We're part of a financial services group the Benefact Group that has a range of ethical businesses or businesses somehow society aligned, and then we're owned by a charity. So that's our mission: grow our business. Our people have successful careers, and through the profit we generate, we give out to good causes. And it's the only model like that in the UK. Certainly, I think it's quite, maybe one other in Europe, something like that. And it really does make us different. And coming back to that whole engaging, empowering the younger generation, having those values and mission and then embodying them is really important. So one of the things we did with the CR committee is we made it a part of every single recruitment process. So the line manager has their own process. We don't mandate that, particularly how that works. But we said that when you're getting to your final candidates, they will all be interviewed by a couple of representatives of that group. So that is having the people in your business that you trust. You're going to bring these other people into, understand who these people are. The people coming in get a better understanding of the business. But the whole meeting is about values. It's about culture. It gave me amazing insight into candidates and how they fit. Equally, it gives them insight that they should really be here. We've had amazing feedback that people of that generation, they genuinely, as long as the gap is not unreasonable, they will come to an organisation like this to meet their values and their mission rather than potentially go for more pay somewhere else. And they've said it's because of that stage of the process, they've seen that in our business and that talent has come to us. And in such a competitive market, that's really important. So they've done loads of great things in that space. And also we're now using them to challenge us as a leadership team as well from the sort of middle. But that for me is my favorite, is getting them into that recruitment process.
Excellent. That's a great idea. Well, maybe...
It wasn't mine, I'm afraid. It was somebody else's. I backed it, certainly.
Right, exactly. Well, maybe for our last couple of minutes, I'd love to hear kind of what legacy you hope to leave as a leader in the industry.
Yes, well, hopefully I've got a few more years left to go. It's something I've only really thought about in the last year or two, actually. Maybe it's a certain stage of your career or your thinking that gives you that space to do it. So from a more sort of business perspective or commercial perspective, I'm really invested in this business growing and being successful. I'm very invested in growing sustainable investment in general. I think that's really important. It has a direct implication for people and planet and all the future current issues, frankly, that we're facing. So definitely like to leave a legacy of advancing that and advocating for that. On a more personal perspective, I think the thing that consistently, as I've been in management and leadership positions, is developing people and seeing them progress in their careers, seeing them take on new challenges and do that brilliantly. That obviously adds more value to a business because you're getting the very best you can out of people. But just seeing those individuals perform to their best ability, that's probably the thing I'd like to leave most of all, is give people opportunity and give them chance to grow, really enjoy their career path, but develop as people through their career paths as well. But trying to find ways to do that. So at the moment, that's leadership, that's mentoring, that may evolve over time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you today.
That's my pleasure. Always a pleasure talking to you, Maureen, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.